Good evening, everyone. It's 6:30, so we're going to get this thing kicked off. It's all about timeliness. So I'm Matt Lyseth, Council President. I welcome all of you for coming. It's great to see such a big turnout. This is a very exciting night and another step for Trinity Lutheran Church. Before we get started, I'd like to call on Pastor Matt to lead us in prayer.
The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Lord God, we give you thanks for the opportunity to gather tonight. As you gathered your disciples at Pentecost, we would ask that you would gather us. We ask that you would send your Spirit to be with us, to inspire us, to propel us forward as a congregation, to follow where you are calling us. We ask that you would be present in this meeting, that you would bless Jeff as he presents, and that you would allow us to have open ears, open hearts, open minds, and open spirits to hear your word for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Pastor Matt. Again, thank you for everybody coming. As I was talking about earlier, this is really another step. We started this process about 3 years ago with our 2020 visioning. We did a CAT scan. We talked about what is the church today, what can it be in the future? And we started with meeting after meeting. It went from the visioning team. It went to dream teams. It's moved on to a building committee. And we just continue to take our steps as we move forward, thinking about what could be for Trinity. And so the next step that we had was we hired a consultant, Jeff Kjellberg, who's behind me, to really come in and say, okay, where are we sitting right now? How does the congregation feel? What are we moving towards? What do we need to address? What do we need to talk about? What are some of the questions that still have to be answered? And that's why we brought Jeff in, because you never know until you really bring someone in, a professional, to really ask the right questions. And that's why we brought Jeff in today. And Jeff has done his listening sessions. He's talked with a random sampling within the church. We can't talk to all of us, so I apologize for anybody who wanted to be on the group. But he was able to give us a good idea of where we're sitting today and how we can move forward from this point. So at this time, I'd like to welcome Jeff Kjellberg with Kairos to give us a little feedback on what he's learned.
Okay, B32. Anybody have B32? That's what I thought. I thought I was coming to call numbers for bingo. Well, you're a very important special client because I drove up this morning to my lake home in Park Rapids, Two Inlets. Anybody heard of Two Inlets? Many of you drive by it, I heard, on your way somewhere. Where's your place? Are you on Woman Lake or somewhere? Aren't you on Woman Lake? I'm pointing at you, Mr. Dovry. Oh. So anyway, I know. I remember where you are. So, dropped my wife off, and it was 80 degrees, beautiful. And she's like, do you really have to go to Moorhead? Like, yeah, probably. So anyway, that's how important you are. I left that incredible scene, that beautiful lake, but the good news is we'll be very timely so I can get back there this evening. So I am Jeff Kjellberg. I was an ELCA pastor. I'm a Concordia Cobber graduate. I'm owner of this company, Kairos. I have done this work for about a little more than 15 years. Have been the owner for the last 11 years. And just somebody reminded me, they looked up Kairos to see what we're about. So you know, Kairos, the name of our company, we love it. It's a Greek word. Chronos means time, sequential time. Chronos is a different word for time. We loosely interpret it as kind of a special moment in time. We call them God moments, that something's stirring, something's nudging you, calling you to kind of pause and wonder what's happening, what's stirring in your midst. So We love the name of this for our company because we're kind of invited into church cultures when something's stirring, something's nudging you to make you pause and wonder what's up, what's God up to here. And that is absolutely true for you as Trinity Lutheran Church. So my job tonight is to share back with you what I heard as a result of some of the work we did, not some of, all of the work we did, through what we call the listening phase of our work. Kairos, and I really believe that's why your leadership hired us. We don't come in to work with a congregation that's considering capital work and just try to worry about money. Try to think, how much money can we raise? Our intention is to be more holistic because raising resources, developing resources is much more about people's engagement with your mission and ministry, the level of affect you're having, the impact. And so we want to measure and read, how are people feeling about this place? What is your, where's the energy, the excitement, kind of the hopefulness for the future? All of those things are critical before we ever start talking about how much money we think we can raise or how much money we are inviting you to consider sharing. So that's a big part of the work that we do. So what I want to share with you tonight is what are some of the things that I heard that really, I think, are relevant to this bigger decision of what your leadership is discerning around what to do with your facility, but also how that'll affect your mission and ministry. So, three things we had as an objective for this listening phase. The first one is we look at where is the level of understanding and buy-in to Trinity's mission and ministry. So that's our first wonderment. How invested, how aware, how connected are you as people of Trinity to the mission and the ministry of this congregation? Secondly, what is the general understanding of facility needs, because that was a clear directive here, and the direction desired for facility renovation or building. So that was a very clear objective to get some input around that. And third, what is the perceived level of willingness and financial capacity from the membership to support a facility or building plan? So those are kind of the general objectives. What I do when I listen especially is don't try to direct too much the conversation, to let people go where they feel they need to go, so I can really get a deeper sense of what people are thinking. So there was a three-phased process to our listening. The first was my opportunity to engage your leadership. I talked with staff, I talked with council, I talked with other ministry leaders. That's my kind of first entree, because I want to know, where is leadership at? What are they thinking? What are they hoping? What is it they're wondering about? Because that's kind of that first layer of leadership. But I've learned over the years that leadership is one layer of perception that isn't always connected directly to what the base, the membership is really thinking. So I want to kind of measure how well they are in the alignment, or where there might not be some alignment. So that was the first phase. The second phase was to implement the missional assessment profile, which is an instrument we've designed. It's an online assessment. How many of you were able to take that? That's great, because we had over 300 that took it, which gave us a significant confidence in data reliability. It's enough, and plus we do some analysis of who actually took it to see if it fairly represents your culture based on age, tenure at the church, and male, female. Well, no, we don't do that anymore. We eliminated that one. But we felt really good about the data or the respondents representing your culture. So we had 308 that took the map. And then I came back in April and did an interpretation of that data to your leadership. Really, it's designed to try to help leaders see what we're learning about your culture as a baseline level. It's a very broad-based assessment, and I'll share some of the outcomes of that. And then the third phase was what we call the more qualitative listening, where I have the opportunity to sit down with individuals as one-on-one conversations and with groups. Groups just allow me to get in front of more people. Interviews are preferred because they're more intimate, and I can get more transparency around that. So I had, 48 individuals that I met with, which was great. And I think out of all the people we had scheduled, only one was not able to come, which is fantastic. When I'm at a church and we have a bunch of people scheduled and half of them don't show up, that's a major red flag to say, well, there's something up here that people are just not wanting to even show up. So that was great. And then we had 9 different groups I met with, representing 109 people. So over 150 individuals, either through interview and listening groups, I got to listen to, which is fantastic. That's a great representation, and it was very, there was diversity of tenure at the church, young and old, invested, not so invested in the church. So I felt really good about who I was listening to, because I don't want to hear the same voice coming from the same kind of group of people. I want to make sure I've got diversity there. So what I'm going to do is share reflections on 2 of these, which is the map. I want to give you some overview of what we learned from the map, and then I'll give you my reflections back of what I heard with the interviews. And I always say, don't shoot the messenger, not to kind of be a precursor to what I'm about to share, but this isn't about me telling you what my opinion is of you. This is me trying to share back to you what I think are critical elements that are important for your leadership to know as they make some very, very important decisions for your ministry, which also affects you, because this is your ministry, not your leader's ministry. It's all of yours ministry. And if you have need for clarity or clarification, just please feel free to raise your hand, shout out a question. I have no problem being interrupted. We will take time after I'm done to get your feedback and your thoughts or any other questions you might have for leaders. But I'm just going to launch into this, unless there are any questions right at this point. Is this what you thought you were coming to? You weren't really thinking this was bingo? So as long as you're in the right place, that's great. Okay, so the map. And the map is not a survey, it is an assessment tool. So we really designed it to be able to measure a variety of things. The level of effectiveness of your ministry, how people value your ministry, how people feel being a part of your ministry. Those are all really, they're kind of qualitative elements we can really measure by using data points. And we don't look at the data as numbers, we look at it as story. Because if you're asked a question or you're given a statement, and you're asked to strongly agree or strongly disagree or in between, we truly believe that you're not looking at that as numbers, you're looking at that as story. So we had 308 people who shared their lens, their perceptions of their experience of Trinity Lutheran, and that's really, really important. So the first thing we do is we've created a metaphor. It's called the MAP, Missional Assessment Profile, but it's a metaphor, MAP, because we believe every congregation is on a journey. And what we want to learn is, where are you in that journey? We're not necessarily trying to get to the promised land. We're not trying to get to a destination. We're on an ongoing journey in this promised land, this place that God has placed you to live faithfully into the mission that God has placed upon you. So what we're trying to look at is, where are you? And we've decided that there are 4 areas that we have created. One is called a stationary area. One is called a puzzled area. One is called possibility area. And one is called, I knew I would forget this because I decided I would share that. So we have it's stationary and nostalgic and puzzled and possibilities. So those are basically determined on how much excitement and energy we sense, how much clarity there is around your vision, your sense of purpose. So for Trinity Lutheran, you are in what's called the stationary landscape. And I apologize, but I'm going to read what I have written because I actually do take this very seriously and want to make sure I articulate it in a way that accurately reflects what this is sharing. So you are in the stationary landscape. So this means Trinity finds itself in what is called the stationary landscape. This is where a congregation experiences lower levels of excitement for the mission while also lacking a real sense of knowing where it is going and why. Two areas are believed to be influencing this placement. Now, I'm going to qualify this. I share this because of what I learned in my listening with interviews. That helps me to understand a little more fully why you're in that place on the map. So the two areas that are believed to influence this is one, a need to identify a clearer sense of purpose for the why and how of Trinity's mission and ministry. Two, many members living in the imagination of what Trinity has been, not what Trinity needs to become. So those are my understandings of what might be influencing why Trinity is where it is. So you're in the stationary landscape. Now we're going to look at some of the other data from the map that kind of helps inform that. First, we look at cultural elements. There are a lot of things within a culture of mission and ministry that influence, your love for it, your experience of it, your engagement with it. So there are two areas within the culture element that I wanted to lift up. One is the issue of feeling respected and feeling valued as a member. The map results identified that something is influencing how people experience being valued as a part of the faith community, like sharing opinions, offering of ideas, being a cohesive community. Those all measured lower than what we would desire. And so looking deeper into what might be behind this will be helpful in moving the congregation forward. So kind of that sense of I'm an important part of this church, my opinion matters, I can offer ideas. All of those are things we measure that didn't, weren't as high as we like to see them. It's not negative, it's just we got to pay attention. The second is transparency and trust, how decisions are made and how well they represent the desires of the whole community. Lack full confidence and understanding. So again, we've done enough of this that we know where we'd like to see churches kind of be and where we know that we need to pay attention. And this is one of those elements around transparency and trust. So this can be as simple as inadequate communication, that people just aren't getting the message or aren't hearing it. We're not doing it enough times in enough different ways. Or as complex as unresolved issues or challenges from the past that haven't been adequately dealt with. That's often the case when we see some issues around trust or transparency. So these aren't negative things, these are things that we just want to pay attention to, all of which helps to position you as you think about doing a major facility project. The other thing we measure is ministry practice. So the map looks at the way a congregation practices its mission and ministry. And by living out your mission and ministry, we call that practice, but those are things you're doing to reflect what you believe your purpose is. Why do you do the things you do, is what we're trying to get at. So a few areas got attention as we looked at ministry practice. The first was faith integration. A church, I think, one of its primary objectives, I believe, is to help people integrate this faith story, this faith journey in a holistic way. to make it not be about a Sunday experience and not the rest of the week, but it's holistic. It's about your whole being. And that's what we call faith integration. And Trinity, based on this assessment, has done an exceptional job of helping people develop a deep and mature faith. And this is significant for a congregation to have as it considers its future. And part of that is many of the people, the tenure or age was 55 and older was probably the bulk of who took that survey, which fairly represents your congregation. But also you've had, the faith maturity to be engaged and a part of a faith culture and community to really deepen your sense of holistic faith life. Clarity of purpose is another one we look at because, again, you do ministry, you practice it not in order to, but as a reflection of what you believe your mission and purpose is. And as mentioned above with what I referred to why you're in stationary, one of the elements influencing the lower sense of belonging and connectedness is the lack of understanding the why of Trinity's mission. People care deeply about the ministry, but demonstrate an inability to really claim what the purpose is that drives it. So that is an interpretation of what we saw in the map as kind of a combo of what I learned in my interviews and what the map said. Does that make sense? I mean, the map was showing us that there's not real clarity. It's not that it's not there. It just needs to be more focused, and the narrative has to be understood. Faith formation, those are areas that you do, like education, small group ministry, worship, doing outreach projects, things like that. There are two things we discovered in this area. The first is that the faith community highly values the worship experience provided by the congregation. So that has high value, strong affirmation. The second is that both outreach and education ministries are not seen as an important part of one's need for being nurtured in faith. Because we don't look at whether you like it or not, we look at do you value it. And so why we want to point this out is as you assess and look at how you're putting in energy and resources, and we look at the measurement around doing education ministry or doing outreach ministry, those are needing to be bolstered or assessed or looked at because they're not given very high value from you as members of the congregation. And those are important things in terms of holistic and effectiveness and health. Readiness for change, the map clearly identifies that the congregation sees the need for change. That's good news. That's not based on, if we don't do something, we're dead in the water, but it's understanding that change is essential in this 21st century and always, but also underscores that there is room for educating the community on how that will look and feel in the 21st century. Change is understood as needed and important. What that looks like and why is needing some clarification and deeper understanding. Entrepreneurial spirit, we had a whole bunch of options for you to choose from for priorities. Where should more energy and resources be placed? And we don't ask you that to try and define, well, then now go do these things. But we wrote them to kind of reflect tendencies of a culture. So if you're worried about growing worship attendance, the tendency of that culture is to be a little more anxious and fearful because you see worship shrinking. So it's not a growth strategy. Wanting more people in worship is not a growth strategy. It's a hope. It's a desire. Strategy is how do you do that? So we measure that, and you measured out your tendencies of the ones you prioritized reflect what we call an entrepreneurial spirit. There was three options. There was sustainability, there was impact, and there was entrepreneurial. So sustainability are the ones that are let's just get more members, let's get bigger, more money in the offering plate. Those are all kind of concern about growth. Impact is about how do we look at our ministry and what the effect of it is. Entrepreneurial is let's get creative, let's be courageous, let's think outside the box as we try to imagine church in the future. And that's where you tended to be when it looked at priorities. And finally, the culture of generosity. We look at that. And as with most faith communities, the map shows that there is room to grow the culture of giving here at Trinity. And so this is a real opportunity to nurture people in giving themselves away, and most importantly, developing a more holistic approach to stewardship. You know, even though we're in the 21st century, we've talked about this for many, 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 many years, churches still have a tendency to approach stewardship as we have a need for money and you have money, so we'd like yours. And you know, you can't do that. We've done it, and it worked because we've kind of lived out of shame, guilt, obligation. You're a member, you voted for this budget, you give to it. Well, that's uninspiring and not very faithful, and it has nothing to do with developing me as a generous disciple. So there's work to be done, not just in your culture, but in most of our church cultures, to learn how to help grow faithful, generous people for their sake, not for your sake. And then hopefully you're blessed as a result of that, but you don't do it because you need their money. So, any questions, or that's the map. That's kind of a very quick overview. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you said that the majority of respondents for the map were over age 55. Did I hear you say that correctly?
Yeah, I can get an exact number on that. Right. Most often, the lowest number of respondents are under 35, mostly because they're not in our churches. And two, they don't like taking surveys or assessments, so they're pretty, I mean, I think you had 7% under 35, which is good. The best I've ever had was 12%. But, you know, I think that your church, 63% of the respondents were over 55. My guess would be that's a fair representation of your demographic in this culture. Now, we don't ask anybody under 16 to take this, so they're not kind of in that equation. So under 35 only represents 17 years of potential, because, or no, 21. Anyway, so, but in terms of, is it common? Yes, because the majority of our churches are in that age bracket. But it's not common in a church where I know they have half their membership is under 55 and has young families. I had one church where 50% of the households had children under the age of 18. 50%. That's, for most of our churches, that is unheard of. Most of it is 25%. Let me see how many you had. You have 28% under the age of 18. That's not unusual, given the fact that 63% were over 55. She wanted to know if we looked at attendance, right? You know, so we looked at a couple of things. One is tenure. How long have you been here? And 69, almost 70% who took this have been here over 10 years. And I think that fairly reflects the fact that that's who you are. And then what did we do? We did worship attendance. So you had an actually a good breakout of that it wasn't all just frequent attenders. Of course, we consider once a month now a active member. But when I was, just fresh out of seminary, if I hadn't seen you in a month, I would have thought you had left. But now you're an active member. So that's good. Which is why worship attendance is a bogus measurement of your impact and contact with your people, because people do tend to come once every 3 weeks or more even. So what I tell churches is take attendance literally over a 4-week period. Literally take attendance to see how many of your members actually have shown up at least once in that 4-week period. And I guarantee you'll probably double what you have as an average worship attendance on a Sunday. So if you have 750, my guess is over a month period, you've touched about 1,500 of your membership. And that's not uncommon. Anything else? I'm going to move into interviews. Now remember, don't shoot the messenger. I'm sharing with you what I heard and what I feel is really important for you as members to hear, as leaders to hear, that are going to help inform your decision making. That's what this is about. How can we be best informed to make the most faithful, wisest, healthiest decisions? Because without doing this, we can tend to make decisions that are out of presumption, assumption, and then all bets are off when you start doing that. So, first, and these aren't in any kind of order of priority. This is my kind of brain dumping of different things that I felt were helpful. So first, and I just kind of title each comment. The first one is, Trinity is family. So when asked what keeps you at Trinity, the overwhelming majority quickly responded with, it's home, the relationships, it's my family. The relationships that people have built here are clearly a key asset to keeping people invested with the ministry at various levels. But there's a but. The challenge is when people respond to this question in this manner, it can often be an indicator that there isn't a significant investment in the actual doing of the mission. Having meaningful relationships is important, but when it is the primary reason for keeping people engaged, it becomes challenging to generate a more broad-based ownership of the ministry and mission. And again, you can call that my opinion, but it's an opinion based on a very, very large database of experience. That's very common. When I hear repeatedly, why do you stay here? I don't want to know why you joined. Not that that's important, but I want to know why you're still here. And if I consistently hear because of my friends, then I know there's something disconnected or missing because they can't necessarily articulate because we're changing lives, because of what we're doing with youth, because of what we're doing with our senior, whatever. That's what we're looking for. The second one is worship is appreciated, and we learned that in the map. There was a great deal of affirmation for the different worship offerings and the quality that each of those experiences offer. Some concern was given regarding the different communities that are created by the different times, styles, and locations of these worship services. Have you ever heard that? So now here is your consultant giving you some advice. Nearly every congregation that offers uniquely different worship experiences in different locations and different times deals with this challenge. So my advice is trying to fix this is less helpful than trying to help people see the value of providing a variety of worship opportunities. Because one, you cannot fix that. We are, creatures of habit, so we tend to, form relationships, and because it's at that particular kind of worship, it's no big deal. Let's celebrate that relationships are being built and are happening, and that you have some excellent worship experiences. And you are so blessed with the kind of quality of people you bring into play for your worship. I'm a groupie of Russell Peterson. So, wow. I've never heard anybody on the planet do a bassoon solo. Until I was at my son's concert at Concordia, where they have all the groups they call it something. Prism, yeah, awesome. And he's in the middle doing a bassoon solo. Okay, staff appreciation. Both pastoral and ministry staff are greatly appreciated. So hear that, staff. Please hear that. A lot of value is given towards having quality staff in place. Although many can reference that Trinity is understaffed, those who are currently serving ministry positions are seen as doing great work. So that's a huge asset to build from. But I'll speak to this being understaffed issue in a moment. Youth ministry affirmation. One of the ministries, and it was the primary ministry, again, when I asked them about what are the assets of this ministry, the most consistent one that people pointed to was the youth ministry. The level of involvement of volunteers and drawing in youth from outside the congregation were key parts of this affirmation. So there was recognition of that as a strong asset, as well as worship. Living in Trinity's legacy. Trinity has a storied past, having been a significant player as a spiritual leader in the Moorhead area. For many, this is a point of great celebration and pride. For others, it serves as a reference point to what they hope Trinity can once again become, or as a belief that this is still who Trinity is. The challenge and opportunity with this reality is to find a way to celebrate the church's legacy of impact while also acknowledging that Trinity is no longer in play. Times are different, the church's role has changed, the people are different, and the local community calls for new and renewed ways of being the church. Celebrating the past as a way of setting the table for what is to come will go a long way in moving Trinity into the future. So there's a lot of commentary, obviously, on behalf of your consultant. But again, from my experience, and just from the consistency, there's kind of this need to get a shot in the arm or shake up the place in a really positive way that moves you past that mindset. It's not a negative mindset, but it's an unrealistic hope that will once again become what we were in 1970, 1980, 1960. And I was here in the late 70s, early 80s, and was very aware of Trinity and very aware of Good Shepherd. Those were the two. But you will not ever become that again. So what is it that you have the opportunity to become? Lay as missional leader. So I want to repeat that. Lay. Are we all aware of what lay means? I want to make lay leadership. So lay as missional leader. Trinity, like many larger congregations, has been impacted by the staff-driven ministry model. As the church grew, the strategy was to increase staff to address new needs and opportunities. However, the available resources to continue this type of model have significantly diminished. As a result, Trinity, like many churches, needs to engage a new model for mission implementation, i.e., equipping lay leadership for deeper missional engagement. What happens in a staff-driven model is lay participation and capacity atrophy because those muscles have not been getting flexed. That reality needs to change so the mission is not so staff-dependent, but depends upon the engagement from all its friends and members. So, this is not new to Trinity. This is happening across the country for churches that grew and responded to growth by hiring more staff. And that happened like crazy in the 90s, the 80s. Just let's throw staff at these needs. But now we can't do that anymore. We need staff, and you need more staff than you have. But to change the trajectory, it has to be more of that first century church where we all are the disciples. We're all the people that implement the mission, not just those folks on our behalf. But we have to see ourselves as the implementers of it. And again, this isn't just on Trinity. This is happening all over the country. Have you ever heard of Lord of Life Lutheran Church in Maple Grove? I mean, they had, I think at one point, 60 staff people. I mean, there is zero chance that they have the capacity to maintain that staff. So now they're in a complete, flipping of the model, which is challenging, but absolutely necessary for them to sustain mission. Okay, leaning into the mission. With the above observation about lay as missional leader, it is apparent that members tend to be more observers of the mission than implementers of it. Not only does Trinity need to work on flexing the lay leadership muscles, the members of Trinity need to bring a more invested sense of advancing the ministry into its future. And the best image I have for this is encouraging people to lean in to the mission rather than sit back and observe. And again, this isn't unique to Trinity. This is quite common in larger churches where people tend to or often live vicariously through others that are doing the mission, and you claim ownership of it, but you're not doing it. You're not engaging in it. You're not making it happen, but you're loving what you're seeing. That's beautiful, but it's unsustainable for growth into the future. Become more engaged in the local neighborhood. When asked to consider where are the opportunities for Trinity's future mission, the local community was often mentioned. This will be an important next step of engagement to identify how this takes shape in the short and long-term future of the congregation, especially as it relates to any facility enhancement or renovation. This isn't a concern that nothing is happening regarding the local context. Rather, it is a desire to grow missional impact in new and innovative ways. And this is something that we will attend to as you think about a facility plan. It can't just be for the sake of getting a better facility, but it needs to be for the sake of empowering you to do mission and ministry that you have been unable to do because of the facility issues, but also because of how you want to connect and engage with the local context. That has to be there. Missional clarity, and I've already talked about this a few times. This was highlighted in the map interpretation. Most participants shared a deep love for Trinity. It's my family, the relationships, it's home. But as stated above, this was mostly due to the relationships they'd established and the sense of family they need for this place. The concern is the lack of ability members have in being able to identify the why or main purpose for what Trinity is doing. This will need to be addressed in significant ways to allow people to unite around a clear sense of purpose for the future and take ownership of how that will take shape. So all of these pieces really play together. This is about how do we create a unified vision, how do we coalesce our energy, our passion, and compassion, because this doesn't happen because your staff does it or somebody else does it. This only can happen because you as a collective body have come together, gotten behind this purpose to help advance it. And that takes energy, excitement, investment, all those things. And that's very obvious that needs to happen. And it's, again, not a negative. It's a huge opportunity. Huge opportunity. Transparency needs. This was another focus area from the map. Participants shared a concern for how things are communicated and the way in which people are invited into decision-making or not. There isn't a clear sense about what is creating these impressions, but it will be important to pay attention to this as critical decision points will be happening in the future. So again, we're going to have to look at how are you trying to articulate and be transparent, communicate, invite in and share. Again, not negative. Most churches deal with this as a challenge, but it doesn't mean you just accept that. You can do something about that. Well, I didn't put it as a recommendation, but one of the things we could look at is we do a communications audit that could help do a broad-based assessment of effectiveness and what are some options for you for changing the strategy. The building is not sustainable. When invited to consider how Trinity could best address its building issues, there was significant agreement that restoration and repair was not the best use of resources. The message seems to be clear that the facility, not including the sanctuary or CLC, is unsustainable, draining resources at an alarming rate, and needs to be reimagined. So that really was consistent. When I talk to people, they could easily go to that place without going, why would we do that? Why don't we just fix it up? I think it's been long enough in your kind of reality to know that it's not sustainable. And with your leadership, one of my clients is Central Lutheran Church in Minneapolis. Have any of you been to Central Lutheran? If you've gone into the city on 35W South going north, you would drive into it if you didn't turn to the east or to the west. So Central is this big Gothic church right in downtown. Had a 60,000 square foot education space, office space that was about 40 years past its really ability to serve their ministry. They'd long since gone past what that, is all Sunday school rooms, small little cubicle rooms. So they're very similar to your situation. And what they decided to do was to save their Gothic sanctuary and blow everything else up. Literally everything. Even an addition that they did about 15, 17 years ago. They just said it's got to all go and we're going to start over and reimagine how this can be shaped to accommodate our ministry in the 21st century. So very inspiring. They did it. It's already almost finished. And you're kind of in that same reality, that this facility is draining resources more than serving mission. The preschool case. Although most people feel that much of the facility is no longer a viable asset for mission and ministry, the case for the preschool as a primary tenant of newly developed space is not clear or compelling. This isn't about a lack of support for the preschool, just an awareness that the reasons for this as a key focus for Trinity's ministry is yet to be understood. And that was fairly consistent. And mostly because in the new design, and this isn't a point out to Kjellberg, but when you were shown some of the basic footprint, one of the whole floors said preschool, I think, and people misinterpreted that as being the entire floor being preschool, which I don't believe is true. So that, I think, fed into that, but it also, though, does say there's some work to be done to make the case if, in fact, you're going to design space that does accommodate the preschool. You have to make that case. We must act now. Time is not on Trinity's side in wondering when it should act. For most participants, this conversation has been going on for far too long. It is time to act now. Kairos. Now is the time. Exactly what that will look like still needs to be clarified, but acting in a decisive way is supported. Quite consistently, very significant support to do something. But there is a big gap between, yes, we need to do something, and here I'll give you $5 million to do it. So that's kind of where you're in. Financial capacity. For many, there are concerns about Trinity's ability to manage its financial needs for current ministry, let alone moving forward with major facility developments. These concerns, however, do not negate people's understanding that Trinity needs to make some significant decisions regarding its facility needs. So that's clear. It is important to note that many were aware of the facility presentation that was made in January of 2018. I got that right, didn't I? It was January? Aware of that presentation that carried a potential price tag of nearly $15 million. So that was kind of in the orbit of people's reference when they were thinking about this. And at this point, it seems highly unlikely that a project of this scope is possible. Even if there was a significant level of excitement, clear focus for mission, and broad-based ownership of the vision, the resource capacity is not there at this point, from my perspective, to allow Trinity to make such a sizable dream happen. But that does not equal nothing can happen. It's just, I did not find the kinds of resources necessary to make a $15 million project happen. Bringing all assets into play. Trinity has been blessed over the years with significant gifts of financial and physical assets that have bolstered its overall resource portfolio, and that is true. Knowing that this is a pivotal moment in Trinity's missional history, several mentioned that perhaps now is the time to leverage these assets to enable the congregation to make a substantial investment in its ministry facility. So I'm going to give you my recommendations, but before I do that, any questions or comments before I do my recommendations? Yes. The comment is that people brought up unsolicited the concern that so much of this imagined new facility would be designated to the preschool, And so there was a need, that made me say there's a need to make that case, to argue that. Some people would say, and this happened more often, this happened a number of times, when did the preschool become our major priority for ministry? So again, it's not that that's wrong or anything, it's just, well, if we're going to make that case, we better make it. Nothing else? Okay, here's my recommendations. I do want to preface it with this saying, in my belief, and I know that some of this might be harder to hear because we all want the rock star, outcome. But I want you to see this as this is opportunity. We hear over and over how the church is declining, how church attendance is down, and blah, 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 blah. But that can't equal that we aren't called into greater mission, that God is not up to something in the midst of what we see happening. So this is opportunity. This is a huge moment for Trinity for sure, but the church at large, to not feel sorry for itself, but to really stand up and say, you know what? We can do something. We don't just have to accept the narrative as it is. We have the power and ability to change the narrative and opportunity to do that. So I think I want you to hear that as a culture that, you still are an important, viable ministry within this FM area. And not only viable, but necessary. This community needs you. And so, again, you can't just look back and rest on your laurels of, wow, we were so awesome. Why can't we just be that again? It's not going to happen. But you got to, flex your muscles. You got to stand up, step in, and say, what is it that we are really being invited to do right now at this time? And I think that's your moment right here. You have the leadership. You have the people in place to advance this. So I'm excited for you, but it's not without challenge and work. We can't just hope for it. We actually have to do something. My grandmother used to say, Jeff, because I'd ask, my grandma had significant means, and I'd say, Grandma, can you help me, with some college tuition, because Concordia was so expensive back then. My last year was $4,500 a year. But my grandma would say, well, Jeff, if you just pray to God, Jesus will provide, And I'm like, yeah, Grandma, I'm pretty sure Jesus is leading me to you. I know it's true. Didn't get any resource, sorry, Grandma didn't come through. So I have 4 recommendations. A fifth would be this communication audit, which I didn't put in here, but we can talk about that. Defining missional identity and purpose. This is not a recommendation to start from scratch in creating a missional identity. Instead, it is an encouragement to take the work that was done by the Dream Team or 2020 and enhance that to develop a clearly articulated missional narrative defining Trinity's future. The pieces are there. Regardless of what has been done, there is a deep need to help the people of Trinity gather a greater understanding of the what, the why, and how of Trinity's ministry plan and future dreams. This recommendation also involves the work of going deeper into the community to discover where there is need and opportunity for greater ministry engagement. Where is there resonance with who you are, your DNA, and with what the needs are that you've identified in your local context. Giving significant energy to this recommendation will go a long way in generating greater energy and excitement for the next phase of Trinity's legacy, because I believe that's where you're at. Financial and physical asset assessment, that's my second recommendation. A team should be deployed to take a serious look at all of Trinity's assets to determine what could be leveraged for the sake of this facility initiative. Included with this should be a more intentional engagement with the donor base regarding major gift potential, because I still feel that there was some work left for me to do there to get in front of some people. Third recommendation, revisiting the facility plan. Sorry, Jim. There has been good work done regarding the facility needs and challenges with a possible solution that was presented in January. Knowing that there doesn't currently exist the potential to raise the necessary resources to move forward with the $15 million vision, there is clear need to move forward with some form of facility redevelopment. It will be important to invite the building team to work with the architect to revisit what might be possible for a significantly less price tag. Fourth, conducting of a capital appeal. Once the facility plan is agreed upon and a clearly articulated missional narrative is in place, Trinity will be positioned to conduct a capital funding appeal. The scope of this appeal will be determined by leadership after the above recommendations are implemented. Those are my 4 recommendations. Those are my thoughts and feedback on what I heard. I do think that this is a moment for you to take a deep breath, take seriously that your Kairos moment is God nudging you to say, you know what, it's time. We can't rest on what we were, and we can't hope that what we can become happens because somebody else does it for us. It's you, the people of Trinity, and not just you that showed up tonight, which thank you and grateful for that investment of your time, but all the folks that have called this place their faith community in some way or another. In order for anything to happen of this magnitude, everyone's going to have to lean into it. Everyone. Even if it's $1,000, $10, $1 million, we're going to need every soul to really see this as a critical tipping point moment for Trinity. Thoughts? Yes.
Expand a little on your thoughts about the daycare. I thought I heard you say it really wasn't viewed as a significant part of our mission, and yet I see it daycare generally around the country these days. There's a real need in the community. There isn't enough of it. We happen to be spending a lot of our time and effort providing something that's very needed. So why isn't it part of the mission in that sense?
Well, I can't explain why people feel that way other than, well, I can give 2 ideas. One is the fact that when they saw this building plan, there was one whole floor that said preschool. And I could be wrong on that, but that was one obvious place that there might have been a little, it seemed so significant. The other one, though, is the fact that it feels like there hasn't been enough intentional kind of informing or lifting up and celebrating the fact that we have the preschool, and it is important. It's vital for our community. Again, it's not equal to we don't want the preschool. It's if you want to give so much space to the preschool in a new building, then we need to know why and how is it so core to our mission. And that's fair. That is absolutely fair for people to want that, and you should easily be able to provide that. So is this surprising to you, what I shared? Does it resonate with your own experience of how you're engaging the community? How did this feel listening to this guy talking in front of you? Go ahead.
60 years ago, I was ordained into the parish ministry, and I had an adult class once studying the book. I had an adult class preparing for membership studying the book, Purpose-Driven.
Turn it on. I had it on there. You turned it off.
The Purpose-Driven Life. Now, I'm not saying that I agree with everything in the book, but I think the first chapter says so much to us. A woman in the class had not been a member of our parish, and we got to the first chapter, which said, "Why do we worship?"
Well, common is so I feel better. That's not the first reason we worship. We worship to glorify God, and that makes you feel better. And if we can underwrite everything we're talking about with this question, how will this glorify God for the next generation? I'm not going to see that myself, but somebody 100 years ago, 50 years ago, less than that, put up that piece of art behind you, and that's worth coming for every Sunday.
You? Well, I don't need to keep you here. I have a lake home waiting for me. Dr. Dovry?
I think the most significant thing I've heard you discuss tonight is the importance of the laity claiming in an active way the ministry of Trinity. I am grateful that there are many who already do that, but I think we have a great opportunity here to, as the Dream Team began that work, to identify what is needed in this community that Trinity can bring to it, and how do we organize and focus and marshal our effort to do that. I think that would invigorate our church in countless ways, spiritually, materially. Community engagement always has a big bonus. So I think there's a real key there about our future.
Yep, I agree, 100%. I don't think it's dead. Maybe a little dormant. Atrophied is the word I would use, but also that it's ready to be kind of nudged and ignited. We are, by the way, I'm hosting a vision kind of mission framing workshop. Has that been solidified, Simon? Did we get that? Well, theoretically, it's going to be June 7th. So I'm going to be back and gather with leaders and start working, hammering away at this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you again, everybody, for coming. Now I'm going to remind you again, we've said this only 150 times if you've been to church in one of the last 4 weeks. May 20th, that's this Sunday. How many services? 1. What time? 10. Where? What's happening immediately after? Awesome. They've been listening, Jeff. This is awesome. So 10 o'clock, we're going to have a service together in the sanctuary. Immediately following, we're going to be talking about this and the next steps for Trinity. And so I'm thankful that all of you were able to come. Please share this with anybody. I think we have recorded it, and it'll be placed on the website. So if anybody wasn't, it's going to make it? Okay. See, I just said it's going to be on the website. I have no idea how that's going to happen, but it's going to happen. So if anybody missed it, please, send them to the website, have them watch this. This is great information. I really see it as our call to the next steps. So what does this mean in the life of Trinity? What does it mean moving forward? I'm so thankful every one of you came. Please share this with everybody. I will see you on Sunday. And before we go, can we close with the Lord's Prayer?